Not sure if it started yet. I think it probably has. Anyway, welcome to the Jessie James Facebook page. I'm Jem Hawkes and I'm here with you. It's 9 o'clock in the evening here in the UK, so if I say this evening, then you'll know what it is I'm talking about. Should be around about 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for you. And what we will do is have a look at a project which encapsulates a couple of different techniques. But one of the things about this is it looks quite tricky and quite impressive, but it's actually really not, and it's a great way to make chain without using any solder. So if, like me, you're a bit klutzy with such things as flames, then this might be a tutorial that you can engage with. So let's have a look and see who is here today. Sarah is hanging out with us this evening, or this afternoon as the case might be, which is lovely. Hello, beautiful. Love, easy and impressive. Well, this is true. I promise you this is achievable. It's a technique which can take a little bit of practice to get smooth, but once you get going, it's a lot of the same step over and over again. So once you've got the hang of it, you can make it to your heart's content. You can turn it into drop earrings, you can turn it into asymmetric pieces, you can wear it on the wrist like I'm planning to this Halloween with the piece that I've created for you. We've got Sherry, good evening to you, my lovely. Gracie's in from Southern California. Rosanna is here. Hello, babe. How are you? Deanne is in. Julie is in. And Virginia is in. Hello to you all. I'm so pleased that you've joined us today. And I hope that you're going to love this project as much as I do. Whilst we are gathering people to today's live here on the Jessie James Facebook page, what I'd like to do is give you a quick look at the project that we're going to learn. Hello, Elvia. If I've said your name wrong, I'm very sorry. Many apologies if that doesn't get quite the correct pronunciation. Let's have a quick look down at the board and see what we're looking to create today. So I've got the rest of this super cool and impressive box for you here to look at. So many beautiful, vibrant colours, some sultry pieces. I particularly like these beads, especially when teamed with the deep black, almost spinel looking pieces. Those two together are classic and elegant. This is so extraordinarily cool. I almost made them into earrings to just wear straight away. Lots of spacers and bits and pieces and loads of these beautiful fluffy drops as well. So I've worked a couple of these into the piece that I've made ahead of today. And the technique which I'm going to show you primarily is the Egyptian chain link, which, as I say, it's not tricky. It's something that once you've got the hang of it, you can create acres and acres of the stuff, or miles or inches or meters if you prefer. Lovely to have your company today, and apparently I'm going to be live again with you tomorrow at 12 noon. Well, I did know that. I'm only joking. I did know that I was going to be there. I'll be sliding in sideways from work and getting ready to hang out with you as well in the Mojo Designer Spotlight. So hopefully you might be able to pop in and join us there as well. I'm going to show you back down to the board again because I'm really excited actually to share this technique with you. But I'm also excited to, if you haven't seen this bead box before, show you some of the incredible beautiful pieces that you're going to get inside. So very cool. These, I don't know if they're howlite or howlite effect, but the turquoise colour and an ivory colourway on the mini skulls. You've got one of these as well, an absolutely giant with a massive drill aperture. I would quite like to see that with some macrame, as I believe, I'm told this is the pronunciation for the US. In the United Kingdom we call it macrame or macrame, dependent on whereabouts you're from. But there's lots of different colourways in here. Coming up to Halloween, these orange ones are always really popular. So orange and pink or orange and purple is a brilliant colour combination to go with. You've got some incredibly detailed bead caps as well. So I'm just going to wash some of these out of the way for the moment, and we'll have another quick look and see who's joining us today. Lynn is in. Hello, sweetheart. Good to have your company. Thank you so very much for joining us. can see my funny face for a little bit longer whilst we just welcome everybody on board. If you're watching the repeat on YouTube, then hello, I won't be replying to you, but I'm certainly here. So let's get back down to the board and we'll take a look at the project itself. So we are going to learn the key techniques of creating the chain link. Now this is a variation on a very old chain link known as Egyptian chain link. If worn with a sensible amount of decorum, it's really quite strong. There's no soldering involved. If you're a little bit skittish around naked flame, or like myself, a little bit clumsy, perhaps you don't want to get involved in soldering, you can still make chain without any heat or fire involved, which I think is a really great way to advance your wirework jewellery making. In addition to the chain, we're going to look at a couple of different styles of drop hangers. So we've got a very, very quick and easy way to add a drilled bead as a dropper, and then a nice variation to add a little bit of variety to your designs as well. So I want to talk a little bit more about the wire now as well. What I have done is prepared myself a lovely set of 4-inch lengths, and they're all measured really, really neatly. They've got very tidy ends, and they've just had a little bit of warmth put through them to make sure that they're nice and straight before we move on. Still waiting on your beads. They will come and they will be worth it. Vera and Zoe are here. Hello and welcome. I hope you've had a beautiful day thus far and it continues to go your way. I'm sure they'll be with you very, very soon, but most definitely worth the wait. They're very, very cool. So there's a couple of dropper variations that we're going to look at, and the main event, which is the chain link. I'll also, if you wish to, show you how you can create a very, very simple hook and eye closure. Now, obviously, if you do have your own clasps, you can naturally enough you can use those, but if you just want to work with wire, and this is just 1 gauge, it's all 18 gauge, that's equivalent to 1mm thickness, we're going to show you how to create everything just with 1mm gauge wire, 18 gauge wire, and the bead box. So hello, Janet is in. Also Rosanna says, I've got that bead mix in my design ambassador kit. Used a few beads in the earrings I posted today. Absolutely love those enamelled sugar skulls. Honestly, they are incredibly detailed, really, really cool, and perfectly finished. Absolutely stunning. Thank you so much, Zoe. That's really jolly kind of you. Thank you so much. So I think we have gathered our folks into the fold. What I would like to do is just pop this up out of the way slightly, because otherwise, Rosanna knows what I'm going to say, it's going to go flying. So if I just pop that up into the corner, you should still be able to see just enough of that to understand where this is going to go. I'm also just going to move the bead box over to one side as well. Now, for the bracelet in question that I've made for myself, Shelley is here. Hello and hi and welcome. Good to have your company. For myself, I have quite slender wrists. It's the only part of me that is slender, but never mind, it's just the way I'm built. So I have got 10 chain links in totality, plus the link, plus a central section which uses a bead and a little bit more wire. So what I did is I cut 10 lengths, all 4 inches long, which is around about 10 centimetres if you prefer metric, and that is 18 gauge. I'm using silver colour round German style wire. You could equally use the artistic wire, it will work perfectly well with both. And what I like to do is to create a little production line. So this is the first shape that we're going to make, which I don't know if you remember a film that came out a few years ago with aliens invading, and there was a lady, it wasn't a lady, it was an alien, and she had a hairdo, and this always reminds me of an alien lady hairdo. Can't remember for the life of me the name of the film. So we're going to make, if you want to recreate the bracelet as mine is created, you would need 10 of these little pieces. I'm going to show you a couple of times how to create those. So if I just pop that up to the side for a second, what you do need to have to hand is a round form such as a pen, or you can use your stepped bail making pliers or your two-sided bail making pliers. So the key to making smooth wire work happen beautifully is warming your wire before you get stuck in. So although I've straightened these already today, what I'm going to do is give that a bit of a smooth over the surface. What I do want to know, Sarah, is if you're happy with the white background and the silver coloured wire, because I've got a wooden desk directly underneath the white and I can switch that over if you prefer. Because the wire has a certain sheen to it, I thought it looked reasonable, but if you prefer me to switch that over, now is indeed the time to tell me. So I've got a pen to hand because my it looks good on the white. That's fantastic. Good news. So I've got a pen to hand to show that you don't need any special tools. And the first thing we're going to do with our 4-inch length of 18 gauge wire is find the centre and start forming that U shape. Now I'm going to try and get that to go wrong. It didn't go wrong. I'll show you with the next one. So I've made a shape. And I've made a mental note whereabouts on the round form, in this case a pen, the space is here. Everybody else says the white look good, looks fine, looks good, looks good. Amazing. We will continue on our merry, merry way. So the pen is obviously different breadths or widths as you go down it. So I'm just going to make sure that I always use the same place. And in that way, I'm always going to have the same size in the centre of my wire. Looks good. Fantastic news. So I was going to try to pronounce Dia de los Muertos, but I thought I might get it horribly wrong, so forgive me if that didn't come out quite well enough. So what I want to do is to create 2 coils coming out from the bottom, going outwards on both sides of that elongated U shape. So I'm going to do this a couple of times just to make sure that you're happy with how this all comes together. So I need to pinch quite close to the end of the wire itself and the end of those round nose pliers that I'm using. I'm going to start by turning a circular form to begin with. I might take that just a little bit further to make sure it stays nice and round. Now I've got the beginnings of a round form, so I'm just going to squash that down slightly. Make sure I'm happy that that is nice and sturdy and stable. And I'm going to start moving that coil. I'm supporting underneath that U shape so that the wire doesn't get pushed out of form. And what I want to do is to take this probably a little bit more than halfway along the available length. Now the reason I do this like a little production line is I will get all of my wires bent into that U shape. Well, I'll cut them first, all of them bent into the U shape, and then I will line them up and I will use one as a master, and in that way your chain links will all be the same size. So this needs to go just a little bit further along. Pick up my bent chain nose pliers and scooch that up just a tiny bit further. Sit that down over the top, and I can see that that length between the coil and the bend is very similar. So I'm going to flip the design over and create another coil. The coils need to go outwards from that U shape. So again, supporting that underneath, starting by creating a round form. Now, one of the key things that tends to go awry with people creating coils the first couple of times they try is that they try to rush it, try to get the pliers in and do it all in one go. My advice for that would be to just go steady, take it in small manoeuvres, and in that way you will end up with much nicer coils. And inside of me, right deep down right now, I'm thinking, please don't go wrong, please don't go wrong, but that is the nature of live. So what I would like to do now is just drop that down. Now you can see there's a difference because I've pinched my master link so that those 2 coils meet in the middle. And to achieve that, I'm going to very firmly grip the U section and draw those 2 sides together. Now to get them to meet fully in the middle, if I flip this up ever so slightly, you can see that one is slightly out of line with the other, and that is on purpose because I want those coils to cross over a little bit because the wire wants to bounce back out again. And then I can just adjust that by hand, keeping my master in the same place all the time. What I'm going to do is drop this down over the top and make sure that they are indeed the same length. So that's how we've created our chain link. I'm going to show you a second time, and then we'll move on to how to create a centerpiece with a bead and some droppers, and then we're going to link everything together. So I'm going to go for one more of these. This is my new master now because it will match the shape I've made with the pen. Didn't mean to show you the brand name, so sorry. So again, we're going to warm that 4-inch length of 18 gauge wire through. You may, if you prefer, grip hold of the end of that section of wire just to make that nice and warm and fluid. Bring the pen or your round form or your stepped bail makers, which are the ideal, into position, and then push that all the way around. Now what I want to do on this one is get this horribly wrong. So if I take the pen out of the way, this is something that happens quite a lot, and you can see that that was not centralised. What I want to do is show you how to fix that without any dramas whatsoever. So I'm going to, whoops, it's going to fling itself across the page. I'm going to bring that back into position, and the side that's longer, I'm going to draw around a little bit further, pinching very, very firmly, and then opening up the other side. And if you do this little by little, it's actually helpful if you don't have to hold it up to camera. You can fix that issue by moving those very, very slightly until you get those ends in the same position. I'm going to take the pen back out of the way now. And if you do need to just straighten that up, you absolutely can. So the preference would be to get those equal to begin with. I'm just going to trim that away for a second because I don't have my bent chain, not my bent chainers, I'm so sorry, I don't have my stepped bail makers with me. So we've got back to that U shape again. Oh, thank you very much, Lynn, appreciate it. So what I'm going to do is to create 2 outward shaped coils, and it's around about half of the available length, but once you've set yourself a master, stick to that. And before we move further, what we'll do is we'll just make sure that they're all absolutely identical and even them up. So again, starting close to the end of those pliers, close to the end of the wire, small movements to create as circular a form as you possibly can. Now you can see that that's not quite perfect. So what I would do if I was making this to sell, I would ensure that I was delighted with that. At the end of the day, I would rather discard 4 inches of wire and create a new one than sell a product which I wasn't 100% delighted with. It's actually flattened out quite well, so I'm not overly worried about it. But in the grand scheme of things, you have to value your time as a maker and the ethic behind your own brand. So it's fantastic to be able to create something from not very much. We're not using a huge amount of wire, but also it's lovely to be able to take one's time and ensure that we get that absolutely as perfect as we possibly can. So I'm just going to put a little bit more warmth into this side because I slightly mangled it on purpose earlier. So again, close to the end of the wire, close to the tip of the pliers, draw that around in small movements. And you can see I'm opening and closing those pliers to ensure that I get the shape that I'm looking for. So grip the coil and start to feed that along. So I'm just doing very, very small manoeuvres. It's barely even a quarter of a turn. I want to line that up next to my master. And then we're going to draw those coils together. Now we can adjust those coils slightly if we need to in a moment. Now you can see again, one of the coils is slightly elevated than the other one. And that's really a helpful thing because it allows you to draw them over each other. And then you can draw them back so that they just touch in the centre. I'm going to give both of those a nice squash with any flat facing pliers. I'm using my bent chain nose pliers. And then I'm going to offer it up to the master link. They are feisty. So you can see that this doesn't quite match up. So before you create your chain, what you would need to do is just ensure that everything is as identical as you can possibly make it. So if I pop that down here for a moment, there we go. So we've got 2 of these now, but what I would do is make 10, 12, maybe even 14 of them. They're really handy. And you can make small sections of chain into earrings and the such. So I'm going to pop these out of the way, and we're going to have a look at creating the centre piece of the bracelet, which I'll just pop back down for a moment. Now obviously you've got an absolute plethora of beads to be used in this box. I chose to use one of the small skulls. What I think I might do is yoink one of the ivory coloured skulls from the box and use that as my centrepiece. So the centrepiece here is very, very simple. It's a double wrapped loop because all of the beads in the box are drilled. You could use literally any of them. Now I did make an alternative using one of these. Here we go. So you could, it's got a lovely thumbprint on it, sorry about that, Sarah. You could use one of these, it would make a very sultry centrepiece to your bracelet. So that's another option. So I'm just going to pop that one up out of the way for the moment. And I'm going to show you how to make the centrepiece as far as we need to go. So you've got yourself, let's say, 10 or 12 of these little alien hairdo features. How do you warm the wire? I will show you. Let me grip hold of a 4-inch section of 18 gauge wire. I'm going to hold that at one end and I'm going to run that between thumb and forefinger 3 or 4 times, my lovely. So warming the wire is really a key part of working with wire, especially if you're working with a slightly firmer gauge in wire. What will happen is that you will get the core of that wire, which is often copper. This is the wire I'm working with is certainly copper in the centre and silver on the outside. Getting that all excited inside means that it will just become straighter, smoother and more fluid for you to work with. It's absolutely essential. I wouldn't work without it, having discovered it. Sorry, just threw things across the desk there. So I've got a really long piece of wire just here to work with if I need to, but we're working with quite a diminutive bead. So I think we will have far more than we need. I would say probably you could even use one of your 4-inch lengths if you wanted to. I'm just going to go with, this is around about 6 or 7 inches because it's what I have available on the desk at my side. So this is going to be far more than we need. But what you would do is pop your central focal bead into the middle of your chosen wire. And what I'm going to do is just create a basic wrapped loop either side. So being respectful of the beads always, I'm going to turn a right angle end on one side. You can even do that without the bead in place if you prefer. We're going to create a circular form with those round nose pliers. What I tend to do is to create half a circle with the round nose pliers first, and that's by turning the pliers, and then for the second half of the technique, drawing the tail of wire around. In that way your circular forms are usually quite smooth and often it's much less stressful. So you might want to just adjust how that sits, and we're going to take the tail of wire all the way around as many or as few times as your length of wire allows you and to whatever aesthetic value you would like that to sit. So I think we'll go for 4 turns. I'm going to trim away the excess underneath, like so. And again, just be cautious that you don't leave that anywhere it could cause grief for anyone. And just to get the tail of the wire smoothed away, I'm going to take my pliers and run in the same direction as the wire, very, very cautiously, avoiding contact with your beads, and just sit that down nice and smoothly. So that will now not hurt my skin because it's smoothly just adjusted so that it sits neatly. So I'm going to, the bead will spin, which is all well and good. What I want to do is to create another wrapped loop on the other side. If wrapped loops make you nervous, hopefully this will demystify the process. It really is very easy. If you were making a rosary linked chain, what I would suggest is having one circle in the flat plane and the next circle at 90 degrees, so coming up in the vertical plane. And the reason for that is when you put your rosary links all together, for some reason it just seems to sit a little bit more neatly. Now I've estimated the gap between the bead and where the curve section of that wrapped loop appears. If you get that horribly wrong, you do get a slight chance just to open that back out. So I'm going to, it's actually in the right place, but we're going to squish that until it's almost straight again. Say we needed to take it down a little bit and make that shorter, you can just do that maybe one time. So it's now too close to the skull bead, but we're not overly going to worry about that. But I'm just letting you know that if you do make an error and you put that angle in the wrong place, you can adjust it slightly. So I've adjusted it to the wrong place now, which is all good fun. So again, the pliers go in quite near to the junction that we've created, and the first half of the circular form is made with the pliers just rotating around. And the second half, let me see if I can turn that over, you're going to draw that wire all the way around the section of your round nosed pliers. Just going to close that up and make sure I'm happy with how that's sitting. If you need to adjust, if your wrapped loops are always coming off to one side, I'll show you how to fix that as well. So you'd support the central core and then push the loop until it sits centrally. What we need to do is imagine that the core wire has continued across that loop and it needs to be in a straight line, as if it's just dissecting that circle in two. Hello, Emily. Rosanna, a lifelong piece of wire so you can flip beads off your desk. Absolutely, 100%. Always the best idea in the world. Have too much wire, everything goes whee. All good. So I've straightened my central core wire. I've got my loops on either end. They're in the same orientation because I want them to sit that way on the wrist. I want them to sit neatly. They'll actually be sitting in this orientation, but as I say, because you've got the beads that are nice and have massive drill holes, frankly, you can just spin that around to your requirements. So I'm taking the tail of that wire now and I'm going to draw that around the core wire that we've created. I don't want to get too close to the bead because I do want that skull to be able to spin. So what I'm going to do next is again trim away the excess. So I'm coming very, very close with those flush cutters, which are the best investment ever. And I'm going to support the loop and just squash the end of the wire down so that it sits tidily away, ensuring that I've still got enough space for the bead to rotate. And the reason is we want to be able to sit that in the best possible way when we create the entire bracelet. Thank you very much, Laurie. Where is the video for warming wire? There isn't a video for warming wire. It's very, very simple. We're just going to grip hold of the wire like so and just run thumb and forefinger like so 3 or 4 times. And Bob is indeed your mother's brother, as we say in the UK. Bob's your uncle. Your wire's warm and ready to use. So we've made our central section feature. Now to add in this design, the central feature section, to the chain, I've got 2 spare pieces of wire which I will need to turn into U's and insert into either end. I'm going to show you that on one side only because it gets very repetitious otherwise. So this is a 4-inch length of the 18 gauge wires. No problem at all, Zoe, and thank you very much, Laurie. So as if we were making an extra link for our bracelet, we're going to create that U form. And let's see if we can get that to meet in the middle. Yes, we can. Wonderful. Once you've got that into position, before we start turning those coils on the end to create the alien hairdo, we're going to pop that through the link, and then the process is exactly the same as before. So I'm going to whiz through this because we've already looked at this twice. It's just a repetition. It's just mildly more awkward because now there is a link on one end. So we're creating our coil. The coils still face outwards and they still need to match up with the rest of those pieces. So what I'm going to do for you tonight is to create half of the bracelet, and you do exactly the same in the opposite direction. So I need to match up to my master feature. That looks to be around about the correct size, so I just need to get my second coil into position. Helps if you have the correct pliers. You can, in a pinch, try to make a beautiful coil with your bent chain nose pliers or any fine tapered point, but it will never be quite perfect and you quite often end up marking the wire. So it's really not worth having the laziness that sometimes calls to us. Go the extra 2 seconds and pick up the proper pair of pliers. So I'm just going to pinch that with the skull divider and see how much more I need to wrap. So just a tiny little bit extra in this direction towards the central section of the U before I bring those toy coils together and just get them to meet neatly in the middle. So what we should have is a whole bunch of these now. And before we move very much further, I'm going to show you how to turn it into one of these, which looks a little bit like a skull in its own right, and that's actually the reason I chose to use the Egyptian chain link tutorial for today. So if I pop these pieces out of the way for a second, I'm going to show you this a couple of times. We're looking to create little alien faces or little skulls, however you prefer to think of them. Now, I've had a tool in my toolbox for many years called duckbill pliers, and they're essentially flat pliers that flare at the end. Now, I don't have them with me today. They're in a toolkit which is in the boot of my car, but in the trunk of my car. They flare out and they're really helpful for a design like this. If you don't have duckbill pliers, they're not easy to come by. What you can do is use any flat facing pliers. What you will need to do is imagine the straight edge. These are tapered, they're not the same length all the way along, and that needs to sit at the same position on the coils. So what sometimes you can do is try to put it straight, but there's a difference in the distance between the edges of the coils. So it's closer to the centre here and closer to the edge here. What we need to do is get those pliers, any flat facing pliers, lined up. You need to get some duckbill pliers. When I get them out of the car tomorrow, I'll take a photo and send them to you. So what I'm looking to do is basically hide the coils inside the jaws of my pliers. And what I want to do is to push really firmly and take the U part of our alien hair lady up to 90 degrees. Now you can see that I'm doing that with pressure from my finger, and also by very, very gently tilting the pliers, and this is what we end up with. I will just take one of my example pieces and show you what can happen if you don't get that correctly. And if you push that up, what will happen is it will skew off to one side and you'll make a length of chain that doesn't sit properly. So that now goes in the scrap pot, and I will show you two more of how to get that into position. So we're going to make sure that those two coils kind of touch each other. Hello Jessica, lovely to have you here. I'm going to put those pliers over the two coils, again making sure that the same amount of coil is just sticking very, very mildly out from those pliers, and I'm turning the pliers through 90 degrees but using my hand to support underneath, and we're going to do that one more time. So making sure this is slightly mashed here, so I will take a moment to unmash that very, very carefully, bringing that back around and then squishing that back together, crossing over and then releasing, putting those pliers into position. Again, the coils are equally hidden along the edge of the pliers, turning that up at 90 degrees. So we've got a series of these little beasties going on now, and the next thing that we need to do is to turn them so that they're almost closed but not completely closed up. Hello Nicole, lovely to see you. So this is where your duckbill pliers come in really handy, because what we would like to do is to support both of those wires in the centre. Now as you can see, my tapered pliers are not going to allow me to do this. So what I will do is I will support those two coils slightly further away. I'm going to support the coils, and what I need to do is close up this U. But as the U gets very close to the edge of the pliers, these pliers are tapered, what can happen is it will come out of skew. So we're only going to go so far, and then we're going to stop. So we've got an angle, it's probably about 25 to 30 degrees coming up and away, but our coils are still centralised. If I will just sacrifice one of these pieces I made earlier, so we will get this into a nice straight upright. If I pop my pliers in very, very carelessly and push the edge over, again what will happen is it will skew out of true. You'll have one loop which is lower than the other because the pliers are narrow here and wider here. So that again is going in the scrap pot so I don't accidentally use it. And I'm going to do these last two pieces here very, very cautiously. Best way to show you, I suppose, would be to bring it up. I'm supporting the loops and I'm going to close the tail of the wire around, but I'm going to stop before it pushes into the pliers themselves. And then we'll have a little section all made up together. So again, I'm going to support those loops very carefully, those coils very carefully, push the U-shape wire underneath, and what you're looking to have is everything centralized. Now if it does go slightly awry, you can manage to manipulate that just to sit it so that it's nice and central. So you can see this one's ever so slightly lower, and that's using the pliers carelessly that will have caused that. So what we have now, we've got to bring our central focal bead and do exactly the same process to this, which becomes our first link in the chain. Hello Helen, lovely to see you, sweetheart. Hello Krista, thank you for popping in. So what we're going to do is, this is the first part of the manoeuvre with the chain links. So I'm going to bring those pliers to make sure that they cover equal sections, and I'm going to flip that back until it's at 90 degrees. Once you get up to speed with this technique, you can kind of continue and go all the way over the top, and it becomes a little bit easier. So I'm just going to grab hold of those and draw them slightly further over. And I'm going to create the chain now. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all together. Now this is really the coolest part of the tutorial. I'm just going to make sure that those are nice and neat before I commence. So this again is a technique that sometimes leaves my brain. Truly. So what we're going to do is take the U shape, support it like so, pop it over one of the eyes of the skull till it sits in the middle, and then we flip that up on its side so we can scooch that U shape around both of those. Let's go with skull eyes, that's what they look like. So if I flip that on its back, you can see the U shape is linked to the U shape. Flip that back over. Once you're happy that you've correctly captured both sides of the U form we've created, I'm going to, by hand, never by pliers, push those two eye shapes down so that they sit neatly against the U shape, and that's the first link in the chain. Gracie says, Jem describes the process so vividly, making it easy to try the technique. I think some people think I talk far too much, but I'd rather that you understood everything so that you have the confidence to go your own way and do this yourself. It's really important to me that you love this so much that you can do it. So I'm going to show you that linking technique until we've got our chain of 5. So the first section we're going to pick up, and the key here really, the eyes must be on the upside all the time. If you flip one over, your chain's going to look super weird and it won't all sit neatly. So eyes on the upside, and on the underside you've got the U form. So upside, I'm going to take the U form and put it over the first eyeball. Then I turn that U form through 90 degrees, and if I put this down you'll be able to see part the way through the process. It scooches around the second eyeball before twisting around. Now if we flip this over, what you can check is to see that the U form on the most recent link has linked onto both sides. So there's the lower side and the upper side. They're both captured by the U form of the newest link. So this takes a little bit of thumb strength, but it's well worth the process. So push down and you've created a really good solid link. So I'm going to do this one more time slowly and then one more time quickly. So over the top with the U form, twist around through 90 degrees, bring it back into true. Check, yes, we've captured both sides. Push that eye, or those eyes rather, down until they're flat. Make sure that you're happy with how that looks. Now if you notice, there's a slight variation in the distance between one link and the next link, and that will be caused by me not laying these side by side to check that they all look the same. So this is a really good key indicator that doing it in the process of adding section by section and just having a little production line, you've got your 4 inches of wire, you turn it into a U, you add the coils, you turn the coils up to 90 degrees, you turn the coils over. If at every stage of the game you check to make sure all of your component parts are the same, you won't have that same issue. So I'm going to put the last link of the chain in now. So turn the U form up slightly to encapsulate the first eye. Turn it through 90 degrees upwards and away from you, and then draw it back round. You can flip that over to check. Both of those sections are in together. push those eyes back onto the U form. Run it through your fingers or rub it with your fingers. Oh, that's replying to the heating of the wire. Lovely. Thank you very much, Emily. I love this one too. This is so clever. I cannot say that I invented this. This is a variation that I have honed over the years to something that I saw actually when I went to Egypt in the year 2000, like a million years ago now. Nicole says, I don't think you talk too much. You're really great at explaining techniques and it's very interesting. I'm so happy for you to say that, and I greatly appreciate you making time to watch and to comment. So what you will need to do is generate both sides of your bracelet. So for me, as I said earlier, I have quite small wrists. So I would just measure that around. And for me, using 4-inch lengths of wire and bringing those coils about halfway along, I only need 5 on either side. You can add as many or as few as you need to. One little tip I'm going to show you now is that you can add a tiny bit of curvature to this chain. If you look at it on its side, it's quite flat. It's quite a flat chain link. If I just flip this so that it's upright and I pop my pliers over the surface of that U-form, I'm very, very delicately going to apply just the tiniest bit of curvature into each of those central sections. When I'm gripping the wire, I'm not gripping anywhere where linking is occurring. I'm gripping only the section immediately below that curved U-form. So another tiny bend, another tiny bend, and another tiny bend. And if I show you that sideways now, you've created a chain which can then curve better around your wrist. If you're going to wear this in a straight drop form, such as earrings, they do catch in earrings because you've got all those loops. But if you're brave or you don't have long hair, that's fine. Keep it straight for earrings. Also, if you're going to do very long necklaces, you don't need to add that curvature. But for the wrist, it just helps it sit nicely. And Mr. Skull is always going to spin around if you give yourself enough space. Or Mrs. Skull, or Ms. Skull, or anything. Probably shouldn't have identified that. There we go. So that's our one half that we're going to work on. The next thing that I want to show you is a couple of different ways that you can add cool dangles with these absolutely gorgeous beads. Now I have a section of wire available to me here. This again is 4 inches. It's just one of the pieces that I've cut. I'm in love with this technique, definitely going to practice it. You're a great teacher. Thank you so much. That's really, really kind of you. And I hope that you love it and I hope you have lots and lots of fun. So I'm going to create a little drop bead now. And I think I'm going to use this bead because they are gorgeous. So I'm going to create 3 little loops on the base of this section of wire, which is a really cool way of making your own interesting head pins. So quite close to the end of my section, again, I'm only using 18 gauge wire, giving that a very small amount of warmth. Boshing things across the desk, of course, because that's what my special skill is. So to the end of the wire, to the end of the pliers, we're going to start by creating the smallest, not quite a complete circle that you can muster. So you've got a little loop on the end there. I'm then going to bring in my bent chain nose pliers underneath. I'm going to grip that just opposite the beginning of the wire and draw that back so hard on itself, like so. So you can see we've created a loop and then we've come very, very strongly back. What I want to do now is pinch that section, the angle that we've just created, until that closes up a little bit. We're going to come back in now with the round nose pliers and rotate this around. Now this is harder to show to camera because it's quite close so that you can see everything. If I rotate the section where we've started up and then push the wire across, you'll see that it's almost like 3 little flowers, or even monster toes if you prefer. Now that's a little bit larger than I want it to be, so if I pop those pliers into position and then draw that across, we'll shrink that loop shape down. So again, pliers into position, just next to where the last sharp bend was, draw that back around. Trickiest part of this is holding it to show you, not doing it. So I'm going to support that wire form that we've created and just pinch that ever so slightly together, tighten that up, before we come in to create a third small loop form using those round nose pliers. I'm just going to rotate those around a little bit and then draw the tail of the wire around so that it crosses all the way back around. Now that's slightly out of shape, but you get the idea. We wanted to have a nice circular form there. You can just ever so slightly fix that. Because we warmed the wire, you can get that a little bit smoother. Now what I'm going to do here is pop the bent chain nose pliers or any fine tipped flat facing pliers in the very, very middle of that central circular form. Whoops daisy. And then pull straight away from that. So I'm just going to push that so that it sits all neatly together. Get a really nice strong grip on this form. I'm setting the memory of the wire so that it wants to stay like this. Now I'm opening and closing my flat facing pliers, and what this does is it work hardens, and I'm doing it so hard the camera wobbled, so well, I'm not actually changing it the actual shape of the wire, but I am changing its molecular bonds within. So that is now nice and firmly set, and I've only gone a little bit of the way up the core of the wire because at the top of this design I want to add a wrapped loop. Now I'm going to show you an open and closable loop. If I'm making this to sell, all of these pieces on the demonstration bracelet have wrapped loops, and that is for security's sake. What I want to show you is for expediency now, because we're getting towards the end of our hour together. So I'm going to pop my pliers in close to the top of the bead, allowing a little bit of space, flipping that sideways, drawing the wire forwards at 90 degrees. The wrapped loop technique we looked at is exactly the same as we did earlier with the central section, but I'm just going to show you an open loop because for the sake of speed. If you're going to do this as a wrapped loop, what you would then do is attach this in on the side of your chosen link and just slip that in. Let me just push that so that it goes all the way home, and then you can take that tail around. In fact, I'm here, I might as well show you the wrapped loop technique. So I've added that circular form at the top of the bead onto the chosen side of the chain that we've created together. I'm going to hold my pliers around the circular form, not where any other wires intersect each other. I'm going to take that tail away all the way around. What I want to do, because I'm working with a glass bead here, is ensure that I don't put any pressure whatsoever on it. So I'm going to wrap 1.5 times, and then I'm going to cut the tail of wire away. The bracelet will drop, so sorry about that. But you've added on using a secure wrapped loop. I'm just going to give that end a squish, again being careful of my glass beads to make sure that that sits neat and tidy. And if I show you that one sideways like so, you can add all the different beads. So you can have flowers. We've got some awesome lava beads. I adore these beads with the swirls on the sides. Absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to pop this out of the way for a second and show you the demonstration piece. So each of the 5 links on either side of my central skull have their own dropper bead, and they're all on the same side. What I've done is allowed enough space so that the beads can spin. So you can sit there and you can turn the skull faces, or you can turn things around. A simple open and close jump ring for the gorgeous fluffy tassels. They look like fairy skirts to me. And then at the base of this hot pink lava bead, I've added a coil instead of the little 3 flowers that we created here. So we've seen enough coils today. The technique at the top is exactly the same. What I do need to show you is how to put an end piece on your bracelet. So this is what we're looking to create. Again, I'm only going to show you one side, and I will show you the side with the hook on it, because the loop side, we've looked at lots of wrapped loops tonight, so I don't think we need to repeat that. What you are looking for is a very large loop, like so that it will link onto your Egyptian chain link. So it needs to be at least the same size as the round form that you chose to use. So I'm going to pop my finished bracelet out of the way for the moment, and I'm going to put our sample bracelet just up to the side. Now I have a long section of wire here. What I actually wanted to demonstrate with was a 4-inch piece because it matched in so well. So I'm just going to have to guesstimate to make sure that we can make this twice. So I'm going to have my 4-inch piece of wire, let's say, and about 2/3 of the way along I'm going to create just a circular form. And if I just take that off the pen in this instance, you can see that we've got a round form. Now it's not closed up for a reason, because I want to check that this will go on and it will fit neatly. So I'm quite happy with that. The round form is not complete, and that's well and good, because what I want to do is take the longer of the two tails. Remember, this was 1/3 in from one end. I'm going to twist that so that it sits at 90 degrees to the design. I've just put that a little bit further round than I wanted to, so I'm just going to re-roundulate that form at the end. Make sure that it still fits on my Egyptian chain, which it does. I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to create a round link just here, sorry, a wrapped loop just here. Now when you're working with a very, very large loop, you've got to still support the circular form and take that tail around. Once you've got that first bend, you can switch. You can use 2 pairs of pliers if you need to, but I'm just going to do a very, very quick scooch around and make sure that that's neat and tidy. So to create the world's simplest open and closure, what you can do is you could do a very, very simple, very small wrapped loop here and add any clasp of your choice. But what I'm going to do is go a little way along this central core of the wire. This is my upside because that's the neat side of my wrapped loop. I would obviously take pains to chase that away and make that super tidy if I was selling this piece or going to wear it myself, because you don't want it to drag on the skin. So I'm just going to centralise that circular form, and then I'm going to put my pliers in the same orientation as the loop, and I'm just going to push very, very gently down in this instance, like so. And then we're going to use any round form just to create almost a shepherd's crook style. Now if you have a clasp ready to use, all well and good, but if you don't, in a pinch, this certainly demonstrates your technique. So I'm going to then come to the very end of that wire. I'm just going to coil that around one time so that it sits and meets like so. These have saved my life no end of times. Really, really handy to be able to make a little J-hook, something like this, to get you out of a pinch. Certainly enough to demonstrate a technique. So we've got our hook, which is going to attach to the other end of the bracelet, and we're going to add this loop in exactly the same way as we did the rest of the chain. It's the same size, so it will work. And then I'm going to close those last 2 eyes on the Egyptian chain link. That's now nice and solid. Obviously you can't swing off this. It is not braided rope, it is not para rope, it is not going to support a lot of weight, but for everyday wear, I've got some that I made about 7 years ago that is still in everyday use. Now if I just bring my initial bracelet back into position, I made quite a small wrapped loop at one end. I also added one of these incredible sugar skull, I guess, design charms to the end piece just because I could, and I think they're so incredibly beautiful. And then very simply you can add that into your design. Now this wouldn't necessarily be for everyday wear, but it is proof of concept, and it's also to show you how just one reel of 18 gauge wire is enough to make jewellery. So in terms of putting on and off a design like this, you've got to decide which way those are going to hang, and then I would hold that against my body with one hand, and you can bring that around and loop that over. If you don't have a friend to help you, you can just snuggle that into position. So this is just like an emergency clasp if you like. So let's pop back up to my funny face. Here we go. Hello, I hope you enjoyed that. Let's have a quick gandaroo. Does that show? So it is possible to create your own clasp with these designs. That's really blurry because it's focal length is set to my face. But you can see the design there in wear. Now I've put this on upside down because I need to be able to hold my hand this way up. I would put that on the other way up if I was going to wear it and be walking around. However, if it does go on the wrong way, it still looks really cool. But I've been looking for inspiration, and as soon as I opened this box, it really made me think of the Egyptian chain link, because they do look like tiny little skulls. Let me just show you that there. That's just a small length of chain that we've made together this evening. And they do kind of look a little bit like skulls. I really enjoy that process. I really enjoy this design. As I say, I didn't invent Egyptian chain link. This is just my interpretation of it. You can play around with how big the coils are. What you would need to make sure is that there's enough space in the U-shaped section of your link to fit over those coils. So there's lots of different ways that you can make that your own. One of my favourite pieces that I've made was in an antique bronze wire using this technique. Absolutely beautiful, and I still wear it to today. So I hope that you've enjoyed our Jessie James time together on Thursday. I've no idea what the date is, or all I know is that it's Thursday and I'm here with you on Jessie James. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. I know I've really enjoyed this project. And the bead boxes, I'm just going to give you one more flash of the bead box before I leave you. Let's bring that back in, purely because all of the pieces that I've used in the demonstration, and this was an alternative to the centre section to have that sexy octagon black design. You could, if you wanted to, you'd need to make it slightly larger so that it would be comfortable to wear the larger skull. But here we go, check this out, and this is where everything does go on the floor. These are awesome. I adore these, absolutely fantastic. You could alcohol ink them, I think you could do lots with them. But there's so much still in there, and that's after I've made the project up. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Thank you very, very much for your support of Jessie James. And I hopefully will see you tomorrow noon, I think it is Eastern Standard. It's 5 PM for me here. And then I'll be back with you Thursday of next week. Take care, lovely JJB beady friends, and I'll see you soon. Bye!